He rolled up without lights, without siren. Just the lazy glide of a cruiser that had learned the street bends to it. The window slid down and the sergeant in aviators looked me over like I'd wandered onto his front porch and tracked dirt on his holy rug. 3 words and my Sunday turned into a storm. "You live here?" And I said yes. Corner glass house movers, late red silk dress because I was stubborn and it was hot and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Then his smile sharpened. The 2 shadows climbed out. A big guy cracking his knuckles for the audience and a younger one eager to laugh at the wrong jokes. They fanned out like a 3-man curtain on Maple Ridge's perfect sidewalk. You could smell the cut grass and the money and the entitlement, and I'm telling you this because you need to feel how quiet it was right before he did it. How the birds still chirped, how the sprinklers still ticked, how every camera lens on that block blinked like an eye pretending not to see. Then his hand came down hard where he thought a courtroom might not call it what it was. The crack was obscene, and he said, "That's for being in our neighborhood, sweetheart, like degrading me was a neighborly chore." And I met his stare and said, plain as calendar ink, "You're finished." I could have fought right there, knee, elbow, throat, you know the moves, but I wasn't there for a street win. I was there for the rot underneath the paint, so I let Cole Riker cuff me while his pals Harlow and Keegan played backup singer and hyena. They walked me to the cruiser and I looked at my reflection in the door, a woman in red silk hair, soft hands behind her back, and thought, if this town loves a story, let's give it one it can't swallow. The Westbridge precinct looked like secrets had worn grooves in the tile, 2 stories of brick fluorescent lights that hummed like bad moods air that tasted like old coffee and paperwork. Booking was theater charges tossed like darts, soliciting, loitering, resisting. A desk sergeant who didn't bother to look me in the eye, and then the door opened and the chief stepped out like he'd been summoned by a mirror. Owen Riker, older brother, colder smile. He flipped my ID with a thumb that said, "I decide which names are real." "People get lost out here," he said, "like weather," and I said, "Not me," and he said, "Book her our way." And there it was, the family business written on a public sign. You'd never notice if you weren't looking. They put me in a cell, the color of sick bench bolted to the concrete, a toilet that dared you to want privacy, and still I wasn't alone. I had the rhythm of the building, the scuff of a shoe, the ring of a phone, the way voices flattened in the hall when certain footsteps came near, and I had the tiny transmitter sewn into the hem of my dress, one burst if I needed it, one flare that would end the slow game I'd chosen. So I waited, breathed, counted, told my heart to simmer, and when the young officer with the ponytail came by with a paper cup of water, our fingers touched cold against warm, and I saw it in her eyes, the look of someone who put on a uniform to help, and discovered the rule book had fine print in invisible ink. "They shouldn't have done that," she whispered, eyes darting down the corridor, and I said no, and I kept my voice steady because that's what steadiness does to people on the brink. It gives them a step. You can still be who you meant to be when you swore the oath. I don't need a report. I need one favor. A burner in the women's room. Trash 5 minutes. No questions, and courage when it shows up for the first time barely nods. Jenna Pike nodded. 15 minutes later, I did the most old-school move in the book. Doubled over and begged for a bathroom with the kind of groan every lazy sergeant fears he'll have to mop. They buzzed me out. Pike at my elbow, bleach in the air mirror. Too honest for anyone's good. I lifted the liner and there it was. A cheap phone humming like it wanted purpose. I dialed the number carved into muscle memory. Carver said the man who recruited me to the bureau when I still believed good could fix anything it touched. It's Brooks Code Sierra, unlawful detention, sexual battery by Sergeant Cole Riker. Corruption under Chief Owen Riker. We need IA and civil rights now. And the silence that followed was the first twist that took the wind out of me. Not because silence is rare in Washington, because the word he chose next told the whole story. Talia. He said my first name without my title, like a hand on a shoulder that isn't comfort. Stand down. And he kept going in that clean, surgical tone of people who kill things by phrasing, "The Rikers have friends above my pay grade and far above yours. Chief called me as a courtesy. Says you're unstable, prone to noise. No team is coming. Take the disorderly. Do the night walk away." And I felt something inside me go, still not broken. Still the way a lake freezes. The line went dead. I dropped the phone like it burned. Washed my face until the mirror agreed not to tell on me. Walked back to my cell wearing that hollow look. Men like Riker mistake for surrender. And there he was, smiling because he'd seen the script. "Talk to your boss," he said. "We'll handle this locally," and he shut the door with this little flourish men practice when no one told them no in high school. Here's the part nobody glamorizes. The minute where your throat tightens and your eyes sting and you realize the cavalry isn't late, it was never saddled. And then the part that matters more, you breathe. You separate the hurt from the plan. You put the hurt on the shelf, and you look for allies who don't wear badges or suits with monograms. And one name came back to me like a stubborn song. Caleb Hart, a reporter who got too close to the truth and watched his life get dismantled by a DUI. He swore he didn't earn a divorce that read like a press release, a plagiarism scandal that stank of fabrication. He'd chased rumors of an FBI probe we'd buried under Night Watch and paid for it with his career. Last I heard, he was living with bourbon and old newspapers, which meant he was the exact kind of person who still might do the right thing when it cost him. So I called to Pike in the next round like a person asking for another blanket and gave her the last favor I'd ever ask. Find Caleb. Tell him the woman in the red dress says Night Watch is compromised. Tell him to listen. Tell him to move now. She went pale because she understood without me saying it that my transfer in the morning would include a detour, a stretch of blacktop called Quarry Road, an escape attempt, a tragic end that looks tidy on paper. And she nodded again, a small fierce yes. That made me remember why anyone still signs up to protect and serve. Dawn showed up, gray and uninterested. Harlow unlocked the door without jokes. Keegan looked like his stomach was arguing with his conscience. They shackled my ankles, message received, and walked me to the same cruiser because lazy men stick to familiar tools. Cole behind the wheel, the town rolling past our windows like a brochure. Mailboxes shaped like lighthouses. A flag hung just so, sprinklers switching off at 800 a.m. On the dot. And then highway, then the quiet exit, then Quarry Road threading into pines and scrub. And if you've ever sat in the back of a cruiser and felt each bump like a minute you can't get back, you know, your brain splits. One part catalogs, license plates, and mile markers in case anybody believes you later, and the other part keeps your voice calm because frightened men listen to calm like it's a map. You boys ought to pick a new hobby, I said, conversational, like a Sunday drive. Planting evidence is dated, Riker said to shut up. I said something about microphones and hems and redundancy, and the car drifted, corrected, sweat beaded his hairline. Turn it off, he said. Whatever it is, and I said I couldn't voice activated live layered. Wonder how you sound, cornered. And he hit the brakes so hard the world jumped sideways. Gravel spit. The doors flew open. Harlow hauled me out. Keegan had his gun low and trembling. Riker jerked his head toward the trees and we walked branches scraping silk, little red threads snagging like breadcrumbs, and then the concrete skeleton opened in front of us, Riverbend Overlook, a development that died mid-dream, with a deep round pit collecting stormwater and regret. Last chance. Riker said pistol, half a breath off my temple. Tell me who's listening. And I smiled. Not nice, not crazy, just certain. Everybody, I said. But you can confess anyway, saves time and you know. The part you're waiting for, the burst, the sudden pivot from prey to problem, the way your body remembers 1,000 drills. I gave him a heel to the instep and a head to the nose bone makes a specific sound when it admits it's fragile. Harlow charged and I used what he gave me, weight, momentum, ignorance, and turned both of us toward the edge. Gravity joined the dance. I shoved that last inch, his scream cut when the water did what water does. Keegan lunged. I looped the chain of my cuffs under his wrist, yanked hard. The gun clattered. Breath left him. Riker fumbled for a weapon and found a pocket of air. I stepped in, delivered a knee where it counts, brought both cuffed hands down like a hammer across the soft spot at the base of his neck. Suddenly the only sound was my own breath showing me I was still here. Then the woods lit blue and red like a storm broke in color. Sirens layered state police cruisers, 2 black SUVs that didn't belong to anyone in Westbridge, and a beat-up sedan that fishtailed to a stop so hard, dust stood up and argued with gravity. Caleb Hart climbed out with a recorder in one hand and a tire iron on the seat. And if you're wondering how he got there, the answer is simple, and not simple. Officer Pike knocked on his door in the dark. He chose sober. He set a receiver to pick up the mic stitched into my dress and slid a tiny tracker into the cruiser's trunk when she pointed him to where it slept. Courage isn't loud. It's a chain reaction. You know what I mean. A federal windbreaker approached voice. Careful, ma'am. Are you Agent Brooks? And I said, You're late. Get these off me. He did. And at Riker's hip, the radio spit panic, the desk sergeant yelling about news vans on the precinct steps, about a live stream, about the chief shredding paper with his hands, because the machine jammed, arrests rolled out like dominoes, Harlow bobbing in the pit, Keegan sobbing in cuffs, Riker wheezing through a nose he'd never admire in a mirror again. Within hours, the precinct door wore a federal seal and a new lock. Chief Owen Riker got walked out of his office holding confetti that used to be files, and Deputy Director Lionel Carver didn't make it to his car. Internal Affairs took his wrists in a hallway where he used to receive yes-sirs for sport. What comes next is less cinematic and more holy. Every case they touched got oxygen teenagers who'd been framed because their existence made someone nervous. Got their names said right in court, families who lost homes to code enforcement, found rooms where they were believed the HOA minutes turned into a public document instead of a rubber stamp. Maple Ridge's quiet started sounding like peace rather than fear. With landscaping, and Caleb Hart wrote the story this time, and nobody could put it back in the bottle. He won an award that doesn't pay the rent, but feeds the soul. He stopped keeping a bottle on his desk and started keeping lists of people who still had truths to tell. We meet for coffee. He brings a notebook. I bring the parts of the job I can talk about, and we laugh about dark things the way people do when they've stood at the edge and decided to keep walking. The Bureau asked me to stay in Westbridge for a while, head up a task force that looks for the kind of corruption that calls itself tradition, the little kingdoms that act like countries, the men who think power is proof of virtue. And I said yes because I like my anger pointed at something. Officer Jenna Pike testified with a voice that shook and a spine that didn't. She kept her badge and her compass. The town started doing the small, hard things that make justice feel less like fireworks and more like a habit. Do I think about the phone call with Carver, about the way he used my first name like a scalpel, about the clean sentence he used to try and bury me? Yeah, that happened. I think about it when I sign my name on memos that make it harder for the next Carver to pretend his hands were tied. And I think about it when I stand on my balcony at sunset, jeans, t-shirt, bare feet, tea cooling in my hand, and watch kids bike past without parents calling them back from the porch because the world feels a little less rigged. That's how you know a town is healing, when kids forget